Hello and welcome back to Voices of the Great War. I'm Liz Watson. So today we're going to be reading a few more letters from the Eckert family, and our first letter is from Odo's mother, and it's written to Odo, and it is dated November 17th, 1918. And we know now, so the armistice has taken place. It took place on November 11th, so we're 6 days into the armistice at this time. So this is Odo's mother's letter. Dear Odo, what has happened? We have received no mail from you since October 8th. Have you been sick or hurt, or has your mail been lost? Since the peace, we look for a letter every day. Have you heard from George, and when did you hear from Carl? Well, at home we are all well. There is no danger worse of fretting. It has rained all day, so the girls did not go to town to their aunt's today. Elizabeth's all right now, so the school will be open tomorrow. What are you doing now? Are you still moving from town to town? If so, let us know. Papa is reading and the girls are in bed, so I thought I would try to write. Anita and Aunt Maggie were here this afternoon. Do you think you will soon get home? I will close with love and best wishes from Father and Mother. P.S. As soon as you get this letter, please answer so I can send you a Christmas gift, and let us know if you are getting our mail. So from Odo's mother's letter, we learn that she hasn't heard from him in over a month. The last letter was October 8th, and now this is November 17th. So it had to be very, very difficult for this mother who was desperately waiting for word from her son. During the First World War, obviously that was really the only way to know whether a husband, a son, a brother, an uncle, or a daughter, for example, if they were okay. That was the only communication. And sometimes just because of the mail, and especially because of the way the troops were moved, it took weeks, sometimes over a month before mail was received. And it was very hard. It was excruciating. It's very hard for us to imagine in a world where we are so connected. Now, for example, if we want to get a hold of a friend or a loved one, we can simply call or text. Obviously, back then they didn't have that ability, and there was this waiting, this terrible, awful waiting. It had to have been very, very difficult for Odo's poor mother during that time. So now we're going to move on to another letter. So this letter, it's actually two letters in one. It's written by one of Odo's sisters, Margaret, as well as his mother. And this letter, here's the letter, and it is dated December 8th, 1918. And the first letter is from Margaret, and it's to Odo. Dear Odo, having a few spare minutes to write to you. We haven't heard any more about Carl's death since we wrote last. There are reports that he is wounded and is in a hospital. Maybe you have gotten the Christmas book by this time. It is from home and the other Eckerts. A war expo is being held at the old expo center at the Point. Machine guns, war relics, the Big Bertha, and aeroplanes are on exhibition. An observation balloon is at the expo too. It goes over our housetop, and aeroplanes go over too. We're used to seeing an aeroplane go over, although people still get excited. I guess you know that Annie Weber died last Sunday and was buried on Wednesday. Bunsey, who is Mrs. Sunday's brother, and also Edward Riff, were honorably discharged and are home again. I won't write much, as Mom wants to write a little more, so I will close. Margaret. So before we go into Odo's mother's letter, I have a picture here of a balloon, an observation balloon from World War I, so I'm going to show that to you. So this is a picture of the observation balloon and also the crew. That's kind of interesting. You kind of see it right there. So it must have been a sight, especially in those days, to see this. And even now when, we see the balloons come over, we're like, it's still an interesting sight to see them overhead. And also airplanes, it must have been for, it was such a new technology at that time. And it was probably quite a thrill to see them flying overhead. So I do imagine it probably gathered quite a crowd. So this is the second portion of that letter. This is Odo's mother's letter, also dated December 8th. Dear Odo, Glad to hear you were promoted, but would rather have you here with us. Odo, write oftener. Your letters are so very few. I was at church this evening. Walter Kell is discharged, so you take care of yourself so you can come home to the USA too, so things are not so blue here. Do you ever go to church over there? You ought to go while you're there and see them. Wishing you a Merry Christmas. Hope this letter reaches you in good health. Your mother. P.S. Papa and Albert are very busy. The weather is very warm and the flies are buzzing in the kitchen. Tell us some of your experiences. Carl never wrote home, so now we'll never know what he had to see. Try to let us know where you are as the war is over. There have been many changes since you left. With love, Mom. So from these letters, both from Margaret and from Odo's mother, we learn that they believe and they've been informed that Carl has died. Carl was one of their brothers. They do have some hope because they did get a report that maybe he was wounded and in a hospital, but they're just not sure. And a lot of that did happen in those days. You know, it was sometimes a person could read the newspaper and see word of a loved one's passing on a list in a paper before they actually received an official document of their loved one's death. And I can't imagine how hard that must have been to open up a newspaper and then see that name there. And you live with this hope that, God, please don't let that be true. I mean, maybe there was a mistake, maybe there was a mix-up, because that did happen as well. So right now, the Eckert family, in December, was probably hoping and praying, obviously, that word that they had received that Carl had been killed was not true, and that hopefully that he was just wounded and in a hospital somewhere. So it had to be very excruciating for that family to just sit there and wait and wonder. So let us move on to the next letter. This one is actually from Odo to his loved ones back home. And this is a copy of Odo's letter. It's dated December 23rd. Let me hold on just a second there. That's better. December 23rd. And at the top, you can see that it says U.S. Army of Occupation. So now Odo is in Germany. Because again, the war, we know that the armistice has been reached. So Odo's letter to his mother. Dear Mother, I received several letters from home and the card which Martha wrote telling me of receiving Carl's testament, money, and etc. Hope there is nothing to that report, as there can be mistakes sometimes. I received George's address and am writing to him this evening. Was glad to hear that he is well and located where here is. Sorry to hear of so many of the neighbors and friends dying. I suppose Albert will never be called out now that the armistice is on. On the last day of war, when I was at Hauptschied, Luxembourg, I received a letter from home and also from Aunt Maggie, which were the first mail I received since leaving the U.S. We hiked continuously from that time until the 17th day when we arrived here. I did not have any chance to write until we arrived in Sinzig, but we'll be writing you often now, as we have a YMCA, which is 2 doors from the home I'm staying in. I have a nice room, which I'm sharing with another fellow by the name of Lipscomb. The people of the house are very nice. I didn't know what to say in regards to the length of time we will be stationed here, but I do not expect to be home before March. Watch the newspapers and you will be able to get information about the Army of Occupation and the work it is doing. We are drilling some and getting back to something nearly like camp life in the States. Are the boys being mustered back there? There is not much more to write at present, so I will close with best wishes to all. Your loving son, Odo. P.S. I have not heard of Ray Herbert since I mentioned his being in the 84th Brigade, and I'd like to have his address. So we can see, and we've learned from Odo's letter, that he has also heard, obviously from the last letters he did learn that they are frightened that Carl has in fact passed. And it does sound like, because his wife received those mementos that he probably did in fact pass, yet they're still holding out hope, that maybe there was a mistake in the report. And again, that often happens, so there's always reason to hope. And it's very hard because unless you see that, unless you can actually visualize that loved one that has passed, it's hard for a person to accept that they are truly gone. They're still going to have that hope. But we also learn that Odo, he does seem to be doing well. He's been, we learned from the other letter that he was promoted, and now he is in Germany, and he is staying at a very nice home there. But it doesn't sound like, despite the fact that we've reached the armistice, that he's going to be home probably before March at least. So right after the war, they still had, even though the armistice had been reached and the active fighting was done, they still had to maintain that presence in Germany just to make sure that the aggression had ceased and the war was not going to start again. And also, part of they hadn't reached the Treaty of Versailles yet, but part of it we will learn later is that certain reparations had to be made by Germany, and so the Army of Occupation, and it wasn't just the United States, it was other countries as well, did maintain a presence in Germany for quite some time to make sure that those reparations were paid by Germany, which could also have led to the Second World War as well. So, but the good news for Odo, though, is that he is in a place of safety at this point, and he does seem like he's doing okay, and he does have a nice roommate, and so he's probably somewhat beginning to adjust to maybe this new routine of normalcy while he's there in Germany. So those are our letters for today from the Eckert family. Thank you for joining me, and this is Liz Watson, and this was Voices of the Great War. Until next time.